Okay, that's us recording. Welcome to this week's community call. We have 7 UMIPs up for consideration today. So we'll just quickly run through them. Just to let people know, the next week's community calls are usually on a Monday, but we're going to move next week's community call to the Tuesday, same time, just to accommodate the American holiday for the 5th of July. So next week's community call will be on the 6th, not on the 5th. So we'll dive straight in. Let me just present my screen. Yeah, our first one is a price identifier omnibus, 326. The only comments that were substantive on this was really on snow, where there was low liquidity and the calculations seemed to be inverted. It was Bits and Brews that wrote this one.
Yeah, hi, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, I didn't really know what to make of the low liquidity comment. I didn't know if you guys had a like a minimum threshold or something that you were looking for a you know, price feed or a piece of data for a price feed. So I figured we could just talk about it here today because I didn't know what to do.
Yeah, that's fair. I think it is like a valid concern. Like, does adding this market actually help with getting a more accurate price as opposed to just using the Uniswap market, which is 5 times as large? I would think no. And even if, and it's like 100K liquidity, and if you look at its daily volume, it's like pretty negligible. It's like less than 10K.
Okay.
So I think it's realistically, we probably wouldn't get like very real-time prices from this. And there's only 2 sources, so it would like affect the calculation. So personally, I think it'd be better to just use Uniswap and use kind of a lengthy TWAP like you did. And that would be a better approach.
Okay, I mean, that rationale makes sense. So I can just remove that then and then just use the Uniswap price feed instead of the expression. Or I guess it still has to be the expression to get the ETHUSD price, but other than that.
Cool. Okay. Is everybody else okay with that?
Yeah, that makes sense to me. And I think just as a rule of thumb too, I think Uniswap is usually more expensive to manipulate than centralized exchanges. So if you saw a Uniswap with more liquidity than the centralized exchanges, I think just across the board, it's better to use Uniswap. You get a benefit from the centralized exchanges just if they have way more liquidity. Like Bitcoin, obviously, you're going to get good prices there.
Right. Okay. Yeah, so then later, I think I can do that later tonight. I can pull that out.
Okay, so we're removing gate.io from Snow.
Yes.
Now, the other one that people had noticed, Anu, I think, was that it was inverted on Uniswap.
Yeah.
Just the wrong way down, so that needs corrected.
Yeah. It's just a 2-word change.
Yeah.
Okay, I can do that too.
Awesome.
Any other issues with this price identifier that people want to raise?
Nope.
Okay, so that is a go, conditional on removing Gate.io as a market and correcting Uniswap inversion. Excellent. The next one is UINT KPI UMA, which is the next KPI option for the UMA protocol.
Yeah, there have actually been some changes as of last night and then into this morning, which I have written out into a new draft onto a Google Doc, which has not been put into GitHub yet. It was just like an hour ago. So
it is on GitHub.
It is on GitHub because Britt took it and did that hard part for me, apparently. Thank you, Britt.
Okay.
I was thinking, for the sake of this call, I could introduce the major changes, but then ask the reviewers to review it after, and maybe not try to go through it line by line or anything right now.
Mm-hmm.
Does that sound okay, Bari?
That sounds good. Do you want to highlight the bits where you're talking to, and I'll put them up on the screen at the same time?
Sure. So, Britt, do you know which section in particular? Was it the implementation that made the biggest changes?
I think data specifications is a big one, because we added a lot of like definitions there, a couple like small changes in rationale.
Okay.
And
yeah, the data specifications would probably be it. Yep, right here. Perfect. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
So some of the main changes that we made here were somewhat strategic in terms of what UMA is trying to accomplish, and then also somewhat done for the sake of actually making this a stronger price identifier. So the changes are that we are now only focusing on DAO integrations, and that each DAO can only have one of each integration type. So each DAO could only earn 1 point for each of those 3 products. We've also removed the optimistic oracle from consideration here. So it's a much more narrow focus now on DAO treasury management tools, as shown through KPI options, call put options, and range bonds, or range tokens. I should change that too. And so, yeah. And then the idea is that an integration occurs when a DAO funds with tokens one of those products. And so I've laid out a definition of the word fund, definition of the product categories, and then a definition of the word DAO. And then kind of addressed a few ambiguity considerations around the definition of DAO. And so that in particular, that part is a part I'd like the UMIP reviewers to take a look at. Essentially what I arrived at is that a DAO, that we would want something that's listed on CoinGecko or DeFi Pulse, although actually I'm sure everything on DeFi Pulse is on CoinGecko, just as like a pretty low barrier for what's considered a legitimate project, at least. As long as it's not a DAO that was created merely to spam the integrations, I consider that to be probably okay, but this isn't something I would love pushback on. If people can think of examples or attack vectors or concerns around this definition of a DAO, sorry, not definition of a DAO, but definition of like a legitimate DAO. The other thing here, as I said about how, like, you know, this is not meant to open any debates around whether a DAO is actually decentralized. So like, whether something sort of calls itself a DAO and has a governance process, we would sort of call it a DAO. Yeah, this is not meant to sort of open that can of worms at all. And yeah, that's kind of the overview of it. Trying to think if there was anything else.
Could I just ask you about this bit? It is up to the discretion of Risk Labs to offer additional UDAO tokens as a reward.
So yeah, so that comes in the context of the above sentences where I'm basically explaining that there are possibly non-DAO integrations that I could imagine UMA wanting to see happen. So you could imagine just like a centralized crypto team that is not marketing itself as a DAO that wants to use our treasury management. And instead of trying to capture that edge case in this UMIP by in any particular way that it would pay off directly, we would just sort of say, hey, this is actually a really cool angle. We want, Super UMIN's help with this. And we could just give additional UDAO tokens. By the way, we changed UINT to UDAO. That's what that means. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I just noticed the name change actually after I asked that question.
So maybe that was what your question was what the hell are UDAO tokens? It was really your question, isn't it?
It was kind of.
Gotcha. Yeah.
I also real quick want to tie that into the community call last week where we were talking about having a TVL threshold. And we kind of liked the idea of just like having the discretion to award additional tokens as deemed fit for efforts that aren't captured in this. So I think that's kind of what that sentence was trying to capture as well. Just another potential use case for, tipping and.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I do still like something that's been removed from this, and maybe Britt, you can lead the question asking on this, but the actual payout function is not in this UMIP right now. And I guess there's a reason for that, which Britt can at least ask the right question about. What was the reason for that, Britt?
Yeah, so last week we had Chris on here with us, and he kind of was like, well, why do all that when you can just bake it into the contract so that all the voters have to return is the number of proper integrations, because that makes it less of a mental load for voters. So I kind of tried to shift it that way. And so the scaling and all of that stuff happens in the contract kind of behind the scenes. So in theory, all that needs to be in the UMIP is our target number of integrations, as well as how to treat any bonus integrations. And then I don't know that maybe this is a question for Sean. I can't remember. I don't know if we need to specify the minimum payout that we wanted to include or not, but the voters don't need to calculate the payout because the contract does that for us.
Okay, I would assume then we should add a section, assuming that we're still going to assign bonuses for large TVL integrations like we had discussed before. We would also need, I assume, like a piece of ancillary data which asks like how many integrations are worth over $5 million. Is that how that would work? Sean? Yeah,
sorry.
Is that how that would work, Sean?
No, I mean, not necessarily. So basically the change was not really, it was like a practical one that was motivated by kind of this concept where it's like the DVM should be answering some sort of off-chain question instead of what the specific payout for this financial contract is, right? And you could just provide instructions in the UMIP where it's DAO integration that meets that TVL threshold just counts as 3 integrations now, instead of saying this counts as 0.087 additional UMA or something like that.
Well, I would say that is that doesn't yield the same result. And I don't think that's a problem, but essentially we were pricing the value of these bonuses as different than integrations. And for example, you can hit the cap of integrations and still then add in a bonus. But the only way to get that bonus would be by achieving a high TVL integration. So it actually is 2 separate sets of incentives in a way that,
yeah.
But
you can still have that here. So if it's for each integration below 5 million, you can count 15 integrations, right? then your cap on kind of the lower value integrations would still be like 15 integrations. And then it's like for each integration that's above 5 million with a cap of 4 of those bonus integrations, you count those like three times instead of 1 time. So you still have 2 separate caps.
And so in this UMIP, we would instruct people to basically hit the cap. So we would say like the most sort of integrations you can have assigned would be 15 or 25, and then add 1.5 integrations for each integration that's worth over 5 million, or add 1.5 points for each integration. And so then all that the contract is receiving is this total number of points, which would translate.
And could translate to different amounts of token values depending on how you set up your financial product library in the contract. I also think like,
okay.
I need to review the language in the UMIP again, but I think it'd be good if it was like a rolling time frame, because what that would allow us to do in the future is like reuse this contract instead of saying like, hey, it's going to expire at this time and we should count any integrations from now until then. We should just say we should count the number of qualifying UDAO integrations in the past like 4 months or something. And that way it turns into a rolling thing instead of like a bespoke one-time use UMIP.
Yes, I also had a question. Can this be like solved by putting this start date of the when we start counting these integrations in the ancillary data and the end date just as a request timestamp? Not to hard. Then we don't need to hard code the rolling period at all. It's just up to the contract launch to define it.
Yeah, that's a good point.
That would be easy enough to do, and I could add back in the ancillary data section and specify which pieces need to be included in ancillary data.
Yep.
And Vari,
I like that design.
If you would scroll down a little bit more, Vari, I actually have the whale bit in there in the integration or implementation right there. So for now, I just have it, these integrations are worth 3 points each. So that was my way of addressing it in the language of the UMIP as is, but we can, I can add like a step 3 if we want to account for a max number of base and then a max number of possible whale points, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's what I would like to see happen, if that would work.
Yeah, that works. The kind of feedback that I need is what we want each of those to be. Now that we're sort of shifting the target again, I don't know what is a realistic target number of integrations, and I don't know what is a realistic number of whale integrations. I actually assume that ratio goes up because range tokens are going to be higher TVL things in general, I think.
Yeah, actually, Britt, like, you don't, I think, and someone could push back on me, but I don't think you actually need to worry about, all you need to worry about is the relative value between an integration. No, I guess you also need to worry about the cap of how many, for sure.
Yeah, that has to go in the UMIP, I believe.
Yeah.
Unless, I don't know, can we put that in the ancillary data or no?
Yeah, you could theoretically put that in the ancillary data.
Okay, so I'll just say that that needs to go in the ancillary data as well as the weighted value that we want to use, like the multiplier for whale integration.
That could also go in the ancillary data.
Yeah,
right.
If we're making this a reusable UMIP, then it should, right? Okay.
So I'm gonna just like put as much as I can in the ancillary data, and then people can tell me if I've gone too far.
Should the TVL threshold be hard coded to say 5 million, or like that wouldn't go in the ancillary data? That would go in the contract parameter, or no? Where would that have to go in the UMIP? Is my question.
Could also go in the ancillary data.
And so, if the answer is 5 million, at what point is that answer input or used, or when do we tell the contract it's 5 million?
We don't ever tell the contract. We just use it in our voting calculation.
So it's 5 million. So voters, can you walk me through like that? I'm saying, Clayton says the number's 5 million. When does that ever when does that get plugged in? At what stage of the voting or whatever?
When you deploy the contract.
Okay. So is it a parameter? Would you call it a parameter?
Yeah. It's called custom ancillary data, and you define it in the same way as you define other contract parameters.
Oh, I thought ancillary data was only something that we gathered from voters at expiry. I didn't realize it was a type of parameter too, or only.
So voters gather it from price requests. And
yeah, so the ancillary data is like additional instructions to the voters.
Instead of saying, I want ETH/USD at X timestamp, you say, I want ETH/USD at X timestamp with these additional instructions.
And so not only can we give them these additional instructions, we can customize those instructions at contract deployment.
Yep. As long as they meet the instructions for the instructions within the UMIP.
Meta instructions. Do we need an UMIP for meta instructions for ancillary data?
No.
Okay, good. Okay. I feel satisfied from what I needed to hear. Is this something that we can do and get voting on the next voting cycle?
I mean, Britt's the author, so
I can make changes today. I can be done with changes today as long as I have input. It sounds like the big unknown pieces are actually going to be established in ancillary data, in which case I would say yes, because this is just going to be instructions. Basically, check this list, talk about the list, decide if it counts. If it does, add it up, stop at the number that's indicated in the ancillary data. So I can be done with it today.
I agree. And I think it's pretty low risk one, since it is kind of subjective and also for KPI options that are non-liquidatable. So I'm good with it this week.
The one thing I would want to have checked on by someone on the dev team would be that minimum payout, just to make sure that that can be baked in the way that we have it suggested it gets baked in.
Cool.
So the outcome seems to be that this is a go, but with additions for auxiliary data. Is that correct?
Clayton's too excited to say no now, so yes.
That's correct. And I now know what it feels like to be to feel like an outside team coming here asking for governance approval. It's a good, it's a good experience. Okay, thank you guys.
So the auxiliary data would be min-max, whale integrations, start and end time.
Just start time.
Probably, yeah, just start. Yeah, end time would be encoded in this request timestamp.
We can also talk through the details later. I don't think it's necessary now.
Cool. Okay, that's excellent. Now the next one was updating the final fees. Now these were set at a particular snapshot time. Market movement might well have caused them to be outdated. I haven't checked since. However, the market's been moving upwards, so it's unlikely that they've gone below 300. There were some comments that I updated about an hour ago where some were just a bit out of kilter. Any further comments on this one?
Nope.
I have a question. How do we scale these in the future when we have more collaterals and they drop very drastically, be volatile? It's not obviously scalable to prove an UMIP every time we need to adjust final fees if we already have a general guidance of 400 USD worth.
Yeah, it's a big question. Like if we changed some things in our contracts and system, we could like potentially have some sort of optimistic proposal type structure where people request new final fees for the collaterals and people propose them. But like right now, it's just kind of a necessary burden. And I mean, it's a simple UMIP, which is the only nice thing, but.
Yeah, I don't know that much about smart contract, but I'm pretty sure there are ways you could automate this like final fee adjustment process to be just a single ETH transaction.
You mean without any sort of governance around it?
Yeah, a governance proposal will be passed to set some sort of parameters and adjustments to allow like where these kind of requests can fall into. For example, probably the request timestamp multiplied by the historical price would give you something very close to 400 USD. We can define something like that, and with that in the contract, adjustment like this in the future can just be ETH transaction without governance.
Yeah. I don't know. So you need some sort of way to get the price on chain, right? For everything. Some things you could theoretically get from Uniswap or whatever, but I think we would want some sort of like normal price proposal process, at least in my opinion. But yeah, it would be kind of a big change, I guess.
I think there's kind of a bigger issue here that we do need to look at. For now, updating the final fees when significant market events happen is really our only way that the contracts work. But it's not all that desirable, and as the number of collateral currencies increases, it becomes a significant burden. But it's a longer term change that we need to think through, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
It's not a problem that's going to like cause us a lot right now. It could grow into one that we need to solve programmatically in the future. So it's good to just have this on the radar in our list to monitor.
Absolutely. You can always like, so we do weekly voting cycles because it makes our lives livable instead of just having like voters and reviewers' lives livable. Instead of just having votes every like couple of days or something. But like if one of these collaterals ever became a problem because say the final fee was too low and price requests were being spammed with it, then like we could always adjust that on like a quicker timeline also. So it's like, it is like a concern, and I agree, but I don't think it's an urgent one.
Fair.
Cool. So that one is a go.
Yep.
Excellent. Now, the next one was the PolygonTVL and the inverse PolygonTVL to be added as price identifiers.
Yes, hello guys. We're working with my mates on this. We're a little bit fucked up because I just 10 minutes before this call I found that we have a lot of comments on GitHub, so we didn't change it yet. So I don't know. Can we talk about this right now, or we will go to the next week?
We can certainly discuss it like right now. As I understand it, the major issues are around historic APIs, rounding, and a bit of an issue around dependencies. I'm not sure if there's other issues that people want to raise. Rainis, you left a few comments. Have I covered all the main ones?
Yes, I think the major was getting this some guidance or how the voters could handle it in case this central API is not available, and also making sure this historical data is available.
As I understand, DeFi gives the historical data about TVL, and so yeah, and about problems with API, I'm not sure how what we can do. We can make some reserve variant for data, something like DeFi pools, but if DeFi it's not working, but I don't know, is it good variant or not, because they're not open sourced. Yeah, and as I understand, we can make some manual guidance for voters for calculating the TVL, but I guess it can be pretty complex. So maybe you have some advices.
Is there like a DeFi Llama methodology that's published somewhere? Or it's like, this is how we get the Polygon TVL instead of just saying this is the Polygon TVL?
I'm not sure about that. I need to go to their docs. Yeah.
Okay. I think that would be a good place to start, but like conceptually, for really difficult to calculate things like this, like I think I agree with your approach where it's okay to use some sort of centralized service like DeFi Llama, but like we should always be able to like calculate it in the absence of that. So just like instructions on like clearly what's actually being queried instead of just like the DeFi Llama Polygon TVL. Right.
Okay, I got it. Thank you.
Did you say that you thought DeFi Llama did have a historical API or no?
As I understand, yes, they has it. They can.
Okay.
But is it covering the same data, or there are some limitations for this historical data?
What didn't get it?
I mean, does it cover the same data and the TVL is the same as this real time? Is it correct?
As I understand, yes, but I will go deep. Definitely.
Yeah, just check it. If it's the same, then cool.
Okay, got it.
By the way, I found the adapter for DeFi Llama for Polygon that I'll share in the chat. So we could use this. I don't know if there's any kind of like proprietary DeFi Llama stuff happening for the TVL calculation, but this is the adapter that they use for Polygon. So we could see if all of that data that they're using is also public and if the calculations are public and see how that works.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Okay, well, it doesn't really seem like there are major barriers. There's a bit of sorting out to do. There's also a bit of an issue with the rounding somewhere. I think, Rainus, you raised it. I can't find it now. Can you remember, Rainus? Oh, yes. There was no rounding instructions.
Yeah, it's just my minor issue. Just to add it, I think it was set in specification, technical specification. Just add the same info in implementation. Just one point.
Okay, got it.
Cool. So that one seems to be a go. Are people happy with that? Conditional on the historical data and an alternative calculation method.
Yep. I think conditional on adding those and that they're adequate, right?
Got it.
So I've got go conditional on obtaining historical data, alternative calculation method, and explicit rounding instructions.
Yep. Just out of curiosity, what are you guys intending to build out of this?
We want to make a tool for investors. If you want to bet on TVL level of big DeFi projects, the Polygon is just the first one. So if you think, if you believe that TVL will go down, you can mint PolygonTVL. So you mint and sold it, and then you can make some income on this. And if you believe that it will go up, you can mint and sold inverted version of this token. So the price will go down if TVL goes up. So yeah, something like this.
Cool.
Have you looked at our LSP contracts?
LSP, what is this? I don't know.
It's probably a discussion for a later time, just because of time. But like, I think it could make it so that it's unnecessary to pass the PolygonTVL inverse price ID. I'm not saying take it out now, because there's like no reason not to pass it. But you could basically use one contract to mint a fully collateralized pair of tokens, one which would be like the long token and the other would be the short token, and the values of each would be inverses of each other. So you'd kind of get that native like tokenized short position out of the box instead of baking it into your price ID.
Good point. We'll think about it. Thank you.
Cool. The next one was the UTVL KPI SDT price identifier for KPI options. Deadcoin, are you on the call at the moment? Perhaps not. There's been a bit of discussion about this, particularly around whether it's better to use the binary option, although it's been renamed the yes-no generic UMIP, or a specific UMIP for this. There's also some questions around a historical data endpoint and alternative to actually directly providing the contract addresses to be considered. Is Greg on the call? Would anyone like to speak to this price identifier?
So if there's no authors on the call, then I think there were some conversations going on in like Discord earlier around this. And we had talked about this previously about not actually like proposing this, because theoretically we could probably use the yes or no query identifier and just pass in a plain text question within ancillary data. I think that kind of proposal was made to save on some of the work and like governance time of actually passing this price ID. And I think it actually works better to have like clear instructions around this price ID. So I don't think we should just say like, no, like we have something else that could theoretically work for this, so let's not pass this. So I think it's like good to review this. Rainis or John or anybody else, what do you guys think?
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't think it hurts to have this UMIP, especially because it's already fully fleshed out. It's just for like similar things in the in the future. You can just piggyback on the yes or no query price identifier for it.
Yep.
Yeah. This also, I think, definitely would not hurt to have it set explicitly. The only thing I think that the major one is to get this historical data and some methods available, or at least having some insight of how stake DAO calculates on backend from on-chain data, so that there is some transparency for the voters that they can double check. I think that's a major point.
It's the exact same issues as the last UMIP we just talked about, right? We need a historical data API, and then also like the underlying methodology. But other than that, I think it looked generally pretty good.
Mm-hmm. Now, I did actually notice that there was another pull request put in for SDT. And I just wonder if they have actually added this in. I haven't reviewed it. But they do seem to have a API in here. So perhaps this is the one that we should be considering, where there is actually an API.
I'm pretty sure this is the same file, Lori, because there's also an API in the other one. I think two people just submitted the same file as a PR. I might be mistaken, but
okay, right, I understand. So this
actually it does look slightly different, so I was mistaken, but the same API is also in the original one.
So are we saying this is a go conditional on obtaining historical data and alternative calculation method again?
I think so, yeah. And also that those work.
So go conditional on obtaining functional historical data API and alternative calculation method. Are people happy with that?
Maybe just a small thing, but not really like alternative calculation method, but just like
explicit.
The underlying calculation methodology.
Excellent. And now 342 is to remove DSD and SGT from the collateral currency whitelist. These are currently approved collaterals. However, there's been a bit of an issue with both of them. I couldn't see any significant issues that people raised with these. Does anyone want to raise anything? Anyone got a problem with removing these?
I think it's an interesting conceptual question on when we should actually remove collateral currencies. And I think it should really only be like in situations where we don't have confidence that the collateral will maintain some sort of expected value in the future.
And at pretty extreme ends too, since like everything across the board went down by 50%, but that's not what we're looking at with this. It's like close to 100, like once you get up to that level. Because crypto in general is volatile, but then certain tokens just, you can totally lose confidence in them having any value at all. And that affects final fees and affects everything else.
Yes, but shouldn't we like be more forward-looking and whether or not these events affect any probability that also in the future drastic decrease and sharp decrease is possible, just considering that something happened before. Because it's not like always the case. If the new contracts are well collateralized also for this low value, maybe it's already reached some floor, so that might be a counter argument for that, unless there is some fundamental problem with asset and it's vulnerable. Also, we expect that it might be vulnerable in the future.
Yeah, it's a good point. I don't know enough details about this to maybe make an argument, but I think for DSD, for example, a stable coin trading 99% off peg seems to be an indication of some sort of fundamental problem. Yeah.
Are we happy to go forward with this one? I
think
don't
so.
hear any objections, so I'll assume that silence is assent. And the last one is to add GYSR, MPH, APY, APW, SNOW, and NDX as approved collateral currencies. Now, for this one, I know you left some comments, Renus, about store fees in particular. And I did go through them a couple of hours ago and recalculated them. So I didn't follow exactly what people had recommended because the market had kind of moved again since however many days it had been. But I tried to get them all around 400. And I also, I think Hexy, you added in the lack of summary for GYSR. And I added in a brief summary for that.
Excellent. That'd be good. Do we have a general guideline around how much trading volume or circulating supply we'd want to allow list something as a collateral?
Certainly GYSR has quite low fully diluted market cap, which was something that you brought up. The reason that it was added in was they've expressed an interest in creating KPI options. It didn't have security in it because the idea was really that we were going to outsource the security considerations, guidelines that contract deployers should consider, rather than actually writing them into collateral currency UMIPs. But I've added them back in, saying that it shouldn't be used in a liquidatable contract. But as far as I know, all they want to use it for is for KPI options.
Yeah.
Got it.
So even saying that it shouldn't be used for a liquidatable contract obviously doesn't prevent somebody from doing that. But kind of personally, I think the DVM's position should be could this collateral currency be used to pay fees in the future? And if yes, then there shouldn't be an issue with adding it. And everything else around volume and depth of market and stuff like that would be more of a product question if you were creating liquidatable contracts, and more of a product security concern.
Got it. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it makes sense generally if we're only doing KPI option without the need to liquidate, then liquidity plays less of a role for the fundamentals of this proposal.
And I agree, we should be an open platform that allows them to do such things. But we also want to do it in a way that doesn't jeopardize the protocols overall.
Absolutely agree.
Okay, all of these collateral currencies are by protocols that are quite interested in KPI options. Does anyone have any further objections to the UMIP being going forward to vote?
I don't.
Cool, that's a go then. Thanks to everybody for turning up for this week's community call. And can I just in particular welcome Rainis, who's joined us now as a member of the team, not just as a community member, but is now part of the team as a tech evangelist.
Yes, that's the role, and I'm really excited and thankful for the team that accepted me.
And it's great to have you with us. It was lovely to see everyone again, and thank you very much for attending.
Thank you all.
See you.
All right. Thank you. Bye.
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 Congrats again. Love it.
All right. Thanks. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, you finally able to make that time. That's great.
Cool. All right. Bye.